Hello everyone and welcome to STEM School. Today we'll be looking at factorising into single brackets, a technique that you'll be using very often as you progress in algebra. So we're going to be going through plenty of examples, and I've got some GCSE questions mixed in so you guys can see the standard of the type of exam questions you're likely to be asked. So we'll start with what factorising is. Well, factorising simply means putting back into brackets. So you'll get an expression that has letters and numbers as you're used to in algebra, and we want to put that into brackets. So this ties on nicely from a previous video where we dealt with multiplying out single brackets. So we'll have something like 7 bracket x plus 3, and we just looked at multiplying out single brackets. So we have 7 times x, then plus 7 times 3. So that'll be 7x plus 21. So this time around we'll get an expression like this on the right hand side, and we're tasked with putting it into the left hand side into bracket form. And the reason you'll do that is because practically it could be easier to work with, and for example you can cancel things down easier. So like I said, we'll be dealing with expressions that has letters and numbers, and we can have different powers too, okay? So there are a few different methods to work out factorising, okay? As we're dealing with single brackets in our early stages of algebra, okay, we're dealing with the common factor method, okay? So how to work these out? What you have to do is to find the highest common factor for each of the terms in the expression. So as a reminder, a term is just the x and then the 3, so that's 2 terms there, okay? So then what you do is you put the highest common factor outside the bracket, and then you put what is left inside the bracket, and you just need to ask yourself, what do I need to multiply the common factor by to get the original term in the expression? And once you do that, you can check this by just multiplying out the bracket using the technique we've done before. So what we're going to do is have an attempt at some factorising questions using this common factor method. And when it comes to algebra, the one thing that should always be in your head are the rules of indices. So I've wrote 2 rules of indices that you should know and you will be using for this topic. So let's deal with the first question. We've got 8x plus 24. So the first task is to find the highest common factor for each of the terms. So we have 2 terms here, 8x and 24. The first step is to always deal with the numbers. So what are the common factors of 8 and 24? Well, the highest common factor will be 8, because what we can say, we have 8 times 1 is 8, and 8 times 3 is 24. Now let's address the letters of each term. Now you only have the letter x in the first term, so it's not a common factor as it's not in the second term, so that can't be a common factor, so we can't put it on the outside of the bracket. So there we go, now we have to fill in the blanks, okay? So now you have to say 8 times what equals 8x. That's what should be going through your head. So 8 times x equals 8x, okay? Then let's go into the second term. 8 times what equals 24? 8 times 3 is equal to 24. And there we go. So let's go on to the second example. We've got 5x minus 20x squared. So let's deal with the numbers first. What's the highest common factor for the numbers 5 and 20? So we have the highest common factor of 5. What, 5 times 1 and 5 times 4. Now let's address the letters. We've got the letter x in the first term, and we've got x squared in the second term. So what you do for the highest common factor, you just pick the letter with the lowest power. So we have x to the power of 1 here. So that's the highest common factor, okay? So now we have to say to ourselves, 5x multiplied by what makes 5x? Clearly that's just going to be 1. And then 5x times what equals minus 20x squared. So 5 times 4 equals 20. Okay, now let's deal with the letters. X times what is equal to x squared. This is where the rules of indices come into it. When you multiply like letters, you just add the powers. So what we have is 1 minus 4x inside the bracket. 5x times minus 4x, you'll get 20x squared. Alright, so let's go on to the third example, and we have an exam question here. We've got 9y cubed minus 6y. So it's the exact same process, you just have to assess each of the terms. What's the highest common factor of the numbers 9 and 6? So the highest common factor will be 3, because we have 3 times 3, and we have 3 times 2, okay? Now let's assess the letters. We've got a y cubed, and then we have a y in the second term. So you pick the letter with the lowest power, so we have y as a common factor. Now let's fill in the blanks. So 3y multiplied by what equals 9y cubed. So 3 times 3 is equal to 9, so we have 3 here. Then y times what is equal to y squared? It will be y cubed, sorry, so it'll be 3y squared, okay? Because you just add the powers, you have 1 plus 2 is equal to the power 3. Now we have 3y times what is equal to minus 6y. So we have 3 times 2, okay? That would make this 6, and then let's do the letters. Y times what is equal to y. So you don't have to include anything else, and that's the final answer. Alright, so this example, I've included it because I just wanted to show you that you need to be a little bit more careful when it comes to dealing with negatives. So let's find the highest common factor of these two terms. So we'll compare the numbers first. We've got minus 18 and a minus 27. So the highest common factor of this will be minus 9. Okay. Now what's the highest common factor between the letters? We've got an x squared and an x. So what you do is you just pick the letter with the lowest power, which is this one, x to the power of 1. And now what you need to say is minus 9x times what is equal to minus 18x squared. And this is where you just need to appreciate that when you multiply two negatives, you get a positive. So you need to be careful with the sign convention here. So minus 9x times 2x, because you'll get minus 18, then x squared, you add the powers, okay? So minus 9x times what is equal to minus 27x. Let's deal with the second term. You'll just get a positive 3, okay? Because minus 9 times 3 is 27, and then we just got the x term here and the x term here in the original term. Now let's go into this question. We've got an exam question now. We've got 20e to the power of 5 f squared minus 16e squared f. So let's do the same thing as before. So the first thing you always do is compare the numbers. So we have 20 and 16. So the highest common factor, 20, 16, it will be 4, because we've got 4 times 5 and 4 times 4. Now let's compare the letters. So we've got an e to the power of 5, and then we have an e squared. So you pick the letter with the lowest power, so we'll pick e squared. Then let's compare the s. We've got an s squared here, and then just a single f. So let's pick the lowest one, we've got f. Okay? So 4e squared f times what is equal to this first term? So 4 times 5 is equal to the 20, so we dealt with the number. Now let's deal with the e. So e squared times what is equal to e5. So let's use the rules of indices. What you have is e cubed, because e squared times e cubed is equal to e to the power of 5. You just add 2 plus 3 in the power. Now let's deal with the f squared. So we've got an f is in the common factor, and we've got an f squared here that we need. So we just times it by f. So 1 plus 1, we add the powers. Now let's deal with 4e squared f times what is equal to 16e squared f. So we'll get a 4 here. We dealt with the numbers. 4 times minus 4, you'll get minus 16. Let's deal with the e. You have e squared, and we have an e squared here. So you don't need to multiply anything, as you've already got it. Now let's deal with the f. You've got an f here and an f here, so you don't need to do anything. So this is the final answer. Alright, so let's move on to the final question. So I've given you a variety of different questions just to show you the type of things you could be hit with in an exam. This one is certainly harder because we're dealing with fractional powers, so it's a little bit more awkward. But all you need to do is just to remember the rules of indices and the rules of fractions. And also there's a good few techniques in this question that I wanted to show you too that will be good for future, okay? So we'll start with the same process as before. We'll find the highest common factor between each of these terms. Start with the numbers. So we have 3 and a 6. The highest common factor will just be 3 because we have 3 times 1 and 3 times 2. Now let's compare the letters. We have x to the power half and x to the power 3 over 2. Can we get a common factor between them? Well, we have a half, which is, think about it, 0.5, and then we have 3 over 2, which is 1.5. So we can get a common factor. You just pick the letter with the lowest power. So it'll be x to the power of a half. Okay, now what we need to do is ask ourselves, 3x to the power of a half times what is equal to 3x to the power of a half? So clearly that will just be 1, as those are the same terms. Now let's deal with the second term. This is a little bit more tricky. So 3x to the power of a half times what is equal to 6x to the power of 3 over 2. So we'll start with the numbers. 3 times what equals 6, you'll get 2. So x to the power of a half times what is equal to x to the power of 3 over 2. What I would do is I would just work out the fractions to the side, okay? So what we're doing is using the rules of indices. So what we have here, we'll have a half times something. I'm going to write it as a over b. A half times something is equal to the power of 3 over 2. This is the rules of indices. We just add the powers, okay? So what we can do is just rearrange this to get the power, okay? So it'll be a over b is equal to 3 over 2 divided by a half. Now, the one technique that I wanted to show you is when you get to this stage where you have a fraction divided by a fraction, something like that, okay? You have a fraction in the denominator. What you do is just flip it, okay? So you flip the denominator fraction. So it'll be a over b is equal to 3 over 2, but you multiply it by 2 over 1. So I've flipped it here. So we can just work that out as a over b is equal to 3 times 2 is 6, then 2 times 1 is 2. So that will just be 6 over 2 is 3. Okay? So that's the power that you're going to times it by to get 3 over 2. So it'll be x to the power of 3. And there we have it. Okay? And of course you can just double check it by multiplying out the brackets, okay? Alright, so that's us finished off with a tough wee question there. I hope this video has helped you. You just need to practice as much as you can to do this topic well. In my next video, I'm going to be going over multiplying out double brackets, which are much more common exam questions for algebra. So I'll hopefully see you all in that video.